Hello friends, this is Agrc 102 and we're going to talk about in this lecture series Unit 7, which is beef cattle feeding. So this will be a three-part mini lecture series. So let's get to our content here. The objectives I'll let you review on your own. Bottom line is we're going to go through a lot of the life cycle feeding programs and identify different nutrient needs as we go through them. So let's talk briefly in this first segment here about how we feed the cow herd and a few of the most important factors as far as it goes in being successful with our cow-calf herd. First things first, profitability on a cow-calf operation really hinges on the calf crop percentage. So the higher number, the more calves that we wean for every cow, the more profitable our operation gets. So for example, if we have 100 cows in our cow-calf herd and we wean 90 of them, that's a 90% calf crop percentage. And you say, well, what happened to the other 10%? Perhaps we've got some sick or death loss there that we lost perhaps 10 calves. Now, in this neck of the woods, you might think a 10% death loss would be excessively high, and it might be. But you have to remember where the major calf crop or cow-calf regions are in the U.S., much different climate, environment situations than what we have here in southern Illinois. Just a couple reminders, gestation is 280 days, and we want to have cows, nutritionally, we want to be supporting them so that they are ready to rebreed between 80 and 85 days postpartum. And generally speaking, cows have much higher conception rates as they begin to gain a little bit of weight back after calving. So from a nutrition and reproduction connection standpoint, to kind of take that a little bit further here, is we want them to be gaining weight just slightly by that first heat. Now, they might begin cycling by day 30 to 45, just depending on how things, how they are from a health perspective and the feed that you're feeding. But certainly we want to have them cycling and gaining a little bit of weight because that has a positive correlation with conception rates, which is CR there. But really, nutritionally, a real critical time for beef cows is that 30 days prior to calving or prepartum to 70 days postpartum. We need to nutritionally support them that last 30 days prior to calving with a little bit of additional energy, all the way through that 70 days postpartum where they will definitely need some extra energy, protein, minerals, vitamins, things of that nature, because they're going to be nursing a calf at that point in time. So that 100-day window is essentially very, very critical in our cow-calf feeding programs. Calving seasons are either going to be March and April or September and October. And the decision on which of those calving seasons that you take advantage of primarily rests on when you want feeders to be available for market and what kind of feeding program that you want to take advantage of. So a March-April calving season is really attempting to take primary advantage of the summer pasture and utilizing that to provide the most nutritional content to your cow-calf herd. A September-October feeding calving season would probably more indicate a little bit more controlled feeding program, so maybe a more confinement type management scenario where they have access to dry lot or pasture, but you're going to be probably doing some supplementation through that winter time in order to control their intake a little bit more instead of using grass and pasture. So, and a little bit depends on what you have available to you as well. Next, when we talk about ration nutrition, are highly influenced by these four things here. Frame size, which is connected obviously to the breed of beef cow that you're raising. Body condition score, we'll hit that over and over and over again as we get through nutrition here. That is a great indicator of nutritional status. Stage of production, whether we're feeding a lactating cow versus a gestating cow versus an open cow. And then the environmental impact. Certainly in the wintertime when we have low temperatures reaching that 20 degree and below mark, we need to supplement some additional energy in order to help them maintain body heat. So there are some environmental factors that come into play in balancing our diets from time to time. All right, to go a little bit further with feeding the cow herd, and we split it up in summer feeding versus winter feeding. As I mentioned in the previous slide, summer feeding is really, really pasture-based. So I asked the question here, what may need to be supplemented? Well, perhaps a little bit of energy, maybe some different minerals based upon your soil types. And that's, generally speaking, if you've got good pasture, might be about it. You might need, some of you like to feed some lick tubs or something like that, some protein tubs. You might know them as that for just a little bit of additional protein. That kind of would be related to how far along your pasture is getting. So the more mature your pasture grass is, the lower protein it's going to carry. So you might need a little bit of protein supplementation through a lick tub that contains some urea or something like that. Milk production is somewhere between 10 and 25 pounds a day for about 100 to 175 to 200 days after that calving time. And if you're going to feed corn silage, that replaces about a third of your pasture. So it kind of give you a little bit of range there in terms of what corn silage might play in the decision-making process. Depending on how many legumes you've got in your pasture, and I'm talking about alfalfa or clover or something like that, you may want to add something for bloat control to reduce your bloat risk there. Next, certainly we can consider creep feeding, and we'll talk creep feeding in much more detail in a subsequent segment here. But creep feeding can help minimize the stress on your cow, especially if pasture is maybe we reach a drought situation or something like that, and pasture gets very limited. And then next is simply manage your pasture. And here primarily I'm talking about either rotational grazing, or if you're not going to rotational graze, then make sure you have the proper stocking density and you manage your weeds with a proper blend of grasses. So you don't want to have a terrible pasture situation and then rely 100% on that for your nutrient supply, because you perhaps will run into problems. As we switch and think about winter feeding scenarios, then we're probably going to need some more energy and crude protein support in relation to temperature environment. So the colder it gets, the more mud that we have, things of that nature, the more that we're going to have to supplement. LCT is lower critical temperature, and that's about 20 degrees in beef cattle. So once that temperature reaches 20 degrees, we need to increase the feed about 1% per degree less than 20. So as we remember back here a few weeks ago, we had some pretty cold weather where we were down in the single digits and even the negatives. You need about a 1% increase in feed intake in order to help them create enough body heat to maintain. Otherwise, they will shiver and burn body fat in order to maintain their body heat, and they'll lose weight. This would be a prime time to use a little urea in the diet to help feed some critical nitrogen at a very, very cheap cost. Supplemental feed only as necessary, and the bottom line really on both of these things, but certainly it can get easy for cost to get away from you in winter feeding scenarios. So definitely do the best you can to control your cost. Here's a good table that I put together that gives you just some baseline numbers on some major nutrients: crude protein, TDN or energy content, or ME, MCal content, whichever one you want to look at, and then some just basic calcium feeding, a pregnant cow versus a lactating cow, and how those differences are going to change. Clearly, as we go from a pregnant cow that's simply gestating to a lactating cow, we have a significant increase in the amount of energy that we need to supply, and a decent amount of protein increase as well. So we're going to pause there, a short segment in the first one, and come back and revisit some other items in the next segment.